in the middle of page 484. If some messenger were to come to us with the offer that death should be overthrown, but with the one inseparable condition that birth should also cease, if the existing generation were given the chance to live forever, but on the clear understanding that never again would there be a child or a youth or first love, never again new persons with new hopes, new ideas, new achievements, ourselves for always and never any others, could the answer be in doubt? Alas, for those who cannot sing, but die with all their music in them, let us treasure the time we have and resolve to use it well, counting each moment precious, a chance to apprehend some truth, to experience some beauty, to conquer some evil, to relieve some suffering, to love and be loved, to achieve something of lasting worth. Page 487. Let us call to mind the great and good, through whom the Eternal has done wonders. Wise and eloquent in their teachings, they were just and loving in their deeds. There are some who've left a name behind them, whose remembrance is as honey in the mouth. And there are some who've left no memorial, whose names have vanished as though they had never been. We continue together with the 23rd Psalm on page 489. Eternal God, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. Runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our tradition is filled with stories. There are stories in the Bible, stories in the Midrash, stories from Ashkenazic lands, stories from Sephardic lands. I would like to tell you one story today, written some 1,500 years ago. It's a story for grown-ups. In fact, most of the stories from our tradition were intended for adults. It's a novelty of the modern world that we assume stories are for children. That was not the case in previous generations, certainly not the case for the sages of our tradition. This story comes from the Talmud, tractate Avodah Zarah. After eating the forbidden fruit, Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden. They were cast out into the harshness of the real world. They had the bodies and minds of adults, but each were as naive as a child. They adjusted as they could to this new world. They labored to find food and create a shelter against the elements. But then something happened that they did not expect, something dreadful. The sun that had given them light and given them warmth, the sun began to fade. It was not noticeable at first, but once they realized it was happening, there was no mistaking the progress. The sun was growing dimmer, and they watched in dismay as it slipped steadily away toward the horizon. It faded quickly now. They stood there in terror and watched it disappear. The sun was gone. Within minutes, the sky too began to dim, and then it was dark. Adam and Eve had never before known darkness. They sat down beside each other next to a tree. They held on to one another and wept. They believed this was the end. This was the death they had heard about, but had never seen. The world had ended. For hours they sat by that tree. They didn't eat or drink. They just sat in sorrow and wept. But then something amazing occurred. Something they didn't imagine possible. The darkness started to give way to light. At first, the light was gentle, hardly noticeable, but soon it grew brighter. And then the sun burst forth over the horizon in all of its brilliance and glory. It was dawn and a new day, a new beginning. Adam and Eve were elated. They could not hold back their smiles or their relief. They were alive. Adam said to Eve, "This is the way of nature, and I did not realize it." This story of the first nightfall is so innocent and simple. But what does it mean? Why did our ancient sages tell this story? What's the message? It's clearly a parable about death. Some have said that the message is about the immortality of the soul. The sun's rebirth is a metaphor for our soul's rebirth after death into the afterlife. That could be, but that's not how I see it. I believe that this story is a lesson for the mourner. I believe it's a parable for us, we who suffer the pain of loss. When we lose a loved one, our world descends into darkness. The world becomes bleak. The blackness is impenetrable, and it seems as if this darkness will never end. When we lose a loved one, someone so precious to us, our hearts are broken. It hurts so much, and it just keeps hurting, hour after hour, day after day. Remember for a moment what it was like 1 month after a devastating loss. All the visitors have gone. You come home to an empty house, and it wrecks you. You go to speak to the one you lost, and they're not there to respond. You look at their things and wonder, how will you carry on? After 2 months, it's the same. After 3 months, the same. You will yourself to get out and be with friends, go to a show, but you don't feel like doing anything. The depression is all-consuming. And it seems in the midst of this pain that it will never get any better. It seems that we will never be happy again. It seems that the blackness of the world is the new reality, permanent. Our life will just be bleak and lonely and painful, and that's just the way it will be from here on out. But somehow, a new dawn arises. Time passes, and more time passes, and there begins to be light again. It doesn't happen in an instant, but it's a gentle glow that builds. In time, we find that there is a smile again. There is a moment of laughter. Then there is a real feeling of cheer. Then there are some good days amidst the bad days, whole days that are good. And there's light again. Sometimes there's even new love. Sometimes there are new babies born that are absolutely delightful. Now the dawn has fully broken through the horizon. It is bright and brilliant. There is joy. Not that we forget. We can never forget the ones we've lost. We think about them every day. We will go somewhere that they used to love and think of them. Or we'll go somewhere new and think they would have loved this, or they would have hated this. We wonder what they would have thought about the latest things going on. We think of them when the family gathers and stare at the spot where they would have sat. And some days are just bad, or there are moments when the pain is still sharp, but it's different now. Healing has occurred, and life has revived. Our spirit has revived. As a rabbi, I have walked the path of grief with so many people that I care for. Every person is unique, but there is commonality to the feelings that we hold in the road we must travel. We are all human. I have walked this path of grief with you. I have seen you in your depths. I have also seen the healing and the renewal and the rekindling of life and personality. I have seen the new chapters that have opened up. And when this happens, I always think about this story of Adam and Eve and the new dawn. I think of the rabbis of old and how they too must have walked with their people in their time of grief and recovery. And that's why they put this story in the Talmud. It meant something to them. It means something to me. It speaks a truth that resonates within me strongly, which is why I wanted to share it with you today. When we are in the midst of our darkness, when our loss is new and our wound is fresh, we simply cannot imagine ever getting out of the darkness. But the dawn comes nonetheless. The dawn comes just as sure as the sun rises each morning. And we can say, just as Adam said, this is the way of nature, and I did not realize it. We resume in the middle of page 489. Giver of life, our times are in your hand. One generation comes into the world to be blessed with days of peace and safety. Another goes through the valley of the shadow, enduring the cruelties of persecution and war. Heartbreaking have been the times that have fallen to our lot, O God. We have lived through years of tyranny and destruction. We are schooled in sorrow and acquainted with grief. We have seen the just defeated, the innocent driven from their homes, and the righteous suffer a martyrdom as merciless as any ages have witnessed. At this hour of memorial, we recall with grief all your children who have perished through the cruelty of the oppressor, victims of demonic hate, the aged and young, the learned and unlettered, all driven in multitudes along the road of pain and pitiless death. Their very presence on earth was begrudged them, for they brought your covenant of mercy and justice to the recollection of your enemies. They perished because they were a symbol of your eternal law. Their death has brought darkness to the human soul. They lie in nameless graves, in far-off forests and lonely fields, and the substance of many was scattered by the winds to the earth's four corners. Yet they shall not be forgotten. We take them into our hearts and give them a place beside the cherished memories of our own loved ones. They now are ours. We remember with sorrow those who death has taken from our midst during the past year. Cheryl Altman, Laura Appel, Mac Arnold, Todd Barton, Loretta Bauman, Richard Beck, Bill Berenfeld, Donald Bernstein, Norman Blackman, Max Bloom, Barbara Blumenthal, Richard Blumenthal, Donald Brown, Marion Callahan, Marvin Cohen, Ira Kotler, Abby Coulter, Roberta Lenore Crane, Larry Denenholz, Gerald Earl, Mitra Ephraimian, Bernice Fennell, Marcia Feldstein, Marshall Feynman, Donald M. Forst, Joan Franzel, Alan Freeman, Howie Friedman, Suzanne Freund, Jack Frieden, Tony Gabriel, Isla Rosenfeld Galanti, Norman Gassman, A. Donald Gilden, Stanley Galinsky, Mark Glanz, Carol Goldberg, Norman Goldberg, Rana Goldberg, Sanford Goldberg, Marcia Goldstein, Alan Goodman, Lucette Grant, Samuel Grossman, Eleanor Grusin, Lee Gervey, Seymour Heftel, David M. Harrington, Clement Hopp, Gladys Aileen Hupp, Esther Jaffe Khan, Norris Cantor, Deanne Kaplan, Muriel Selma Kaplan, Alan Katz, Richard Kosmacher, Carol Cranes, Jerry Cuskin, Bernice Lasberg, Leonard Lauder, Ellen Lenk, William Levine, Susan Lenville, Irene Locker, Mark Loonstein, Ora Mendels, Chaim Merav, Karen Miller, Joanne Miller Serrani, Marcia Newman, Maynard Newman, Arlene Nyman, Seal Oberfirst, George Maxwell Olshan, Ricky Paley, Howard Pinsky, Rick Reed, Marv Rosenthal, Selma Podolsky Riavi, Ursula Schiff, Arlene Schimberg, Ted Schwabach, Roy Schwen, Susan Shackman, Alan Schumann, Steve Schuster, Mort Siegel, Jim Solomon, Howard Spiegels, Marcy Waller Turman, Robin Kasdan Tovey, June Warren, Mark Wharton, Abe Weber, Shirley A. Weber, Nora Weinberg, Robert Weiner, Ruth Weiss, Jerry Wexler, Bernard Joseph Wilkes IV, Audrey Wittenberg. Taking these dear ones into our hearts with all our beloved, we recall them now with reverence. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. We continue in silence.